and welcome back to my channel. Today I would like to talk about books that have language as their main theme or topic. So not books that invent the language as part of their world building, but books that ask more like philosophical questions about language. That said, some of the books I will be talking about do invent their own languages as well. But the language is really just there to tease out questions like, yeah, how do we even manage that languages can mean something? How do we even manage that languages have the capacity to, yeah, form the world? Or how do we relate to other people through language? How do we communicate? So it's questions like that that the books I want to talk about are tackling. So my first on the list is Samuel R. Delany, Babel 17. This is like a classic sci-fi from 1966. It deals with an interstellar war, so it's a bit of like a space opera almost. And in this war, one side manages to develop a language that can be used as a weapon. It can be used to infiltrate the other side better, but also anybody learning the language will automatically turn a traitor. So it's a language that has enormous power, is kind of like quite weaponized, but at the same time it's also a very peculiar language, because this language has kind of like some peculiar features, like for example there are no pronouns whatsoever, so no personal pronouns, no possessive pronouns, so kind of like also not the pronoun I does not exist, so nobody can refer to themselves as an entity by just saying I did this or I have that, or yeah, even kind of like something like my book would not be possible as such. So this of course has huge implications for identity for everybody who uses this language, but the novel also deals with questions at how the conditions of life shape kind of like words and the meaning that words have. And also the question, can words actually shape actions of people? Now, this idea that the language can turn anybody into traitors just by using it, like, is this possible? Can we actually kind of like have a language, or does language have that power that it can make us do something, and maybe even do something that we actually do not want to do? This novel was very influential. It has spawned a whole pile of other novels that then start to explore language as a topic a little bit more. And one of those novels that actually kind of like, is influenced by Babel 17 is this one, Embassytown by China Miéville. Now, this is published much later, 2011. But again, we're in space. This time we are at kind of like a space colony that is, the inhabitants there are like an insect type of alien race. But we also have humans on this planet. And to survive, the humans have to somehow trade with this insect race, because they are able to produce a biotechnology that humans need to survive on the planet. And that's the basic setup. The language that China Miéville kind of like invents for his novel is interesting as well, because the insects that are on the planet, who he calls the hosts, they have a language where they can utter two words or two sounds at the same time. And they're able to do this because they can produce one set of sounds with their mouth and the other set of sounds with their wings. And by that, they're able to kind of like have two different sound systems at the same time, creating meaning together. And they also have to come from the same brain. And the hosts kind of like seem to be very reluctant when it comes to language learning, because this is the only language that they want to recognize. And kind of like to be able to communicate with them, humans have to find a way to do so, because we as humans can only produce one sound at a time. So the humans on this planet kind of like come up with the idea of, genetically engineering sets of twins that then will produce those sounds, but speak as if they just have one mind. So they're kind of like clones, which are biologically identical, and then will be able to communicate with the insect race. And that seems to function quite well until one of those kind of like twin sets that they call ambassadors, a new one arrives who is by himself. He doesn't have a twin, Ezra, and he doesn't have a twin, but he still can communicate with the insects on the planet. And not only that, but the insect race finds his language very convincing and very seductive. So they basically kind of like just fall for anything that Ezra says. And this kind of like the equilibrium that was there before, the balance that was there before, just starts crumbling now. The other feature of the language of the hosts is they cannot lie. They're not able to lie. Until, of course, somebody then comes along and teaches them to lie, with disastrous consequences. So this novel, again, it kind of like explores how to communicate with people or races that we see as other. Aliens, of course, in space on science fiction are kind of stand-ins for other people that we kind of like see as different. So that's one aspect. But the other aspect is also kind of like that there is a language suddenly that is extremely persuasive and can, almost manipulate those hosts into doing things they actually do not want to do. And this brings me to my next novel, Lexicon by Max Barry. Lexicon takes this idea of language that's used to manipulate others to a completely new level. In Lexicon, we meet Emily. Emily gets recruited into a very strange school. Her entry test is equally weird. She's ordered to stand at a street corner and talk to strangers and convince strangers to do totally outrageous things. And Emily is able to kind of like pass this test with flying colors, get into this weird school where the only subject is how to use language and how to use the persuasive and manipulative power of language. That's the only subject and the only thing that the students at this school are taught. And Emily just excels in this subject. When people or students who graduate are then initiated into some type of secret society that's called the Poets. And well, everything goes relatively well for Emily until she falls in love. And again, we kind of like have an additional element to language that kind of like brings the system under pressure and brings it down and makes it crumble. In Embassytown, it was lying and being able to lie. Here it's love and being able to fall in love. The structure of this novel is also very interesting because Emily's story is told in a normal forward moving timeline, and then it's interwoven with a second story that features Will and a place in Australia called Broken Hill, which is in the Australian outback. And this place has been completely devastated. There's nothing left there. It's like a nuclear disaster zone. Nobody really knows what happens. It has been closed off completely. Nothing goes in, nothing goes out. And Will is kind of like on a quest to find out about his past, which brings him then to Broken Hill and trying to find out what actually happened there to this town. And at some stage, of course, both stories, Emily's and Will's story, kind of like converse and mesh together. So this novel is very much about manipulation, language used as manipulation, but also it looks at indigenous languages, the languages of the Aborigines, and how they communicate, how their language is shaped by their world and then shapes their world in return, and also kind of like how indigenous people ascribe power to language. And that's a very different and much more, how shall I say, earthy type of power than this power of manipulation that Emily becomes an expert in. So this is Embassytown. Talking of poets, of course, brings a totally different set of novels to mind, and that's the Long Price Quartet by Daniel Abraham. Here again we have poets, but they do not just manipulate, they have the ability kind of like to have their language manifest as artificial intelligence. And those artificial intelligences then can be used again for good or bad. I personally read this a little bit as not just the power of language, but also the power of perhaps literature. They're not called poets for nothing, the people who have this power and have this power of creation. So this is very much about language and what language creates, and again on how does this relate to our world. What do we do with this? How do we relate to this type of power that this might give us? So this would be Daniel Abraham's The Long Price Quartet. And I'm very thankful to Alan from the Library of Allenxandria, because he has sung the prices of this novel, and this is actually how I found this novel, or this quartet of novel. It's 4 novels. This is just the first 2 in the omnibus edition. So without Alan I probably wouldn't have read this, and this fits perfectly into kind of like the today's theme of language. My second last book for this roundup is Jeff VanderMeer's Acceptance. This is the first novel in the Southern Reach trilogy. Again, language here is examined under kind of like this umbrella of power of language, but also maybe language as a weapon. We follow a team of explorers who go into an exclusion zone to find out what happened in there, and so far no kind of like team has come back. And while they're in there, their language changes, but also the landscape they encounter changes. There are especially 2 structures. One is a tower and the other is like a tunnel system, so an inverted tower. And the explorers, while they kind of like fluctuate between those 2 structures, their language also gets inverted. Like the tower gets inverted into a tunnel, their language also gets inverted, and the meaning of words might not be clear anymore. Up can even be meaning down, or vice versa. So language doesn't behave anymore like they're used to. And the other idea that the novel explores is language like a spore that kind of like invades our brain. the idea of spores and them invading bodies kind of like is yeah, very powerful in this book, and language also kind of like becomes this type of spore that might infiltrate our brain and then yeah, uses it to means that we might not want to be used to. So again, manipulation, but also kind of like a breakdown of communication of sorts, and yeah, language as a weapon. And my last example is not a novel, but it's a short story. So I think I could have picked a novel as well by Ursula LeGuin. I could have perhaps picked The Dispossessed as well, but I rather would like to talk about a short story by Ursula LeGuin, which I think might deserve a little bit more attention and love. And that's short story is The Author of the Acacia Seeds. I have it in this collection, Outer Space, Inner Lands, but I know it has been published in other collections as well. I think it has been published in the Compass Rose as well, and the first time it appeared actually in a collection called Fellowship of the Stars. It's super short. In this edition it's just 8 pages. And I won't tell you who the author of the Acacia Seeds actually is, because that would be quite a spoiler. But it's again about communicating with a different species. But also it looks at questions like, yeah, can other species that are not humanoid actually develop language, and not only develop language, but might they even be able to develop art? So might they actually be much closer to us than we think, because yeah, our language use, and especially our use of language in being able to yeah, write all this wonderful literature, of course, is one of our deeply human features. And this is explored in this story as well, as like all the books that I was talking about explore, of course, yeah, language as yeah, one of our human traits in some respects. Okay, let me know, have you read any of those, or is there anything that interests you where you say, wow, yeah, I would like to pick this up? But also, do you have any recommendations for myself? Would there be kind of like novels or short stories where you say, well, why didn't you talk about this, and have you read that? Maybe you should read this. So yeah, let me know in the comments, and thank you for watching, and I hope to see you in the next video, and until then, happy reading.